Hey guys, so I just watched the video. I think it's called Japan, Living Long Term in Japan. Let me check the title. Um, and as I watched it, I realized it wasn't very specific. It was just kind of saying like there's a lot you're going to realize in terms of like how different a foreign culture really is compared to your own, and like the kind of embedded features you could say in your psyche and your kind of worldview will come to the surface in a very clear way, and then that's in a way that's difficult to simulate, almost impossible, really, back home. So I thought I'd give something a little more concrete in terms of what the actual experience is like. So here it is, living in Japan long term too. So of course, there's different language, different culture. What does that actually mean? Okay, so in Japan, everyone looks Japanese, everyone speaks Japanese, and everyone is indoctrinated by a Japanese culture. What that essentially means is there is a wall between you and society. Sometimes it's more of a wall made of glass bricks that you can see through. Sometimes it's an impenetrable brick wall upon which you can bang your head for eons without anything ever changing. But regardless of its particular appearance, there is a wall between you as a foreigner in Japan and Japanese society. And that wall exists probably between, foreigners in other lands and the cultures of those lands. But I'm going to hazard to say that it's probably not quite as concrete and impenetrable as it is in Japan. Whoever watches this video may disagree, and I admire your optimism and your spirit, and I think that's great. But I should also add that this wall isn't necessarily a bad thing, nor a conscious thing. Culture has a lot of collective properties, things that only really emerge at a certain kind of, what's the word, like a level of mass, I guess you could say. And an individual doesn't have nearly as much mass to influence these tendencies. Not very often, at least. There are exceptions. In the case of Japan, the people who've really influenced how the culture works are the leadership. It's a very, very top-down society. And the way things have historically been influenced here in Japan are through violence, or very, very, very harsh to the letter laws that threaten violence. And there's a great writer, his name is Lafcadio Hearn, and he wrote about life in Japan at the turn of the 19th century into the 20th century. And a lot of the observations he made at that time are still 100% accurate today in the early 21st century. And they'll likely be accurate probably for another 100 years. The level to which Japanese culture has been cultivated and defined and shaped and set is, in my experience, just viscerally and more so intellectually, is probably unprecedented. It's very, very, maybe countries like Saudi Arabia or some of the Islamic countries approach it because they have a very codified way of life, down to the way you dress and certain actions you can and can't do. They're extremely defined. So maybe the Islamic countries would be a good comparison, just in terms of how clearly and strictly cultural conduct is defined. So you've got that to contend with when you come here. And then add to that you don't look Japanese, even if you speak Japanese, you're probably not going to sound 100% Japanese, and the occurrence of foreigners functioning in Japanese society in roles that are, Japanese. So what I mean by that is like you go to a gas station and there's like some white dude, or you go out to drink and there's a foreigner working in the kitchen or taking your order. That's like super, super rare here. And for a lot of reasons, namely, I think it's probably the language barrier and the cultural barrier. A lot of people can't read Japanese even if they speak it, and a lot of people, they reach a point where they kind of just don't want to make the effort to join Japanese society. They see the return on the investment is kind of not worth it, you know? Like you're going to work at a restaurant in Japan after studying a language for 10 years. Yeah, no. So the system itself doesn't really encourage assimilation or acceptance to a very large degree. I've been here 11 years and I still get all the same dumb questions, you know. And it's not like they're malicious. Like, you're white and you can eat chopsticks? It's not... Seriously, that one doesn't go away. There's, you know, how is Japanese food? Can you use chopsticks? Do you have insert item in your country too? Etc. And it's not like they're trying to get a rise out of you. It's just that they look at you and they don't know if you got here yesterday or 20 years ago or if you were born here. There's no way of knowing, you know. So you'll be treated kind of the same, always, by the society here. And it's kind of silly, and some people, oh man, some people really can't handle it. Like, they just lose it because they're used to a certain level of support and inclusion from their environment that doesn't exist here. It's not going to. So if you're going to be here long term, you're going to have to really come to terms with the fact that you're going to face a certain level of patronization on the one hand, like, oh my god, it's a foreigner, and on the other hand, isolation because you're not Japanese, okay? Between those two extremes, patronization and isolation is where you must make things work. And it turns out a lot of people can't do that, okay? For better or worse. They can't do it very skillfully, at least. And what I mean by that is they can't do it without gossiping all day long or getting upset over about the same 2 or 3 things all day long, okay? So, and it only gets worse if you're going to be here long term. You know, time is going to catch up with you. Age is going to catch up with you. And you're going to reach a point where you're like, what the heck am I doing with my life? So personally, I've been here almost 11 years. And pardon me, I'm going to put the straw in my coffee. Terrible, I know. I don't put a lot of effort into the production of these videos. I really just like to kind of share my thoughts. And I'm a super busy guy. And maybe that's why the channel's not that popular. I don't know. But hopefully you like what you hear as I say it. So anyways, yeah, as time catches up with you, this is true no matter where you are in the world. Your options, the range of options and the realistic amount of energy and time you can invest pursuing them generally narrows. You know, unless you're like extremely rich and you have a lot of free time, which I don't. I have more free time than I used to actually, but I also have a lot more. Anyways, my point is, the longer you're over here, the more difficult it's generally going to be to A, change your situation here, especially if you have kids and you're invested in a job. You know, you can't just turn on a dime and go, let's go do this. It's going to take, you know, a couple years, optimistically, maybe more. And then B, the harder it's going to be to find a place in your country that's going to provide you with the same standard of living you're currently enjoying. That's just what happens, you know. The longer you work and live somewhere, the more invested you're going to be in that area. And the problem is in Japan, there isn't a lot of room for you, so to speak. Culturally speaking, socially speaking, you really have to be clear about what kind of environment you want to live in, right? So the most successful people, foreign people I've met living in Japan, have always been entrepreneurs. They've always been people who've had the mindset to make things happen and to create their own space in Japan. And the most unhappy people I've found in Japan, foreigners, have been people who've just kind of found a job and went with it and expected things to kind of work out the way they would back in their own country. And they don't, okay? Especially with English teaching. This is kind of a dark truth that I really haven't found much on. As an English teacher, you can get what is a pretty good salary, believe it or not, walking with about $2,000 a month in Japan is like a really decent salary, generally speaking, in Japan. Even in Tokyo, although of course it's not going to go as far in Tokyo. So that is great when you first get here. People feel like, yeah, this is it's not so bad. I don't understand why all these people on the internet are bashing Japan. And there are a lot of people on the internet who bash Japan. A lot of it's just venting, of course, you know. But if you look at the actual topic, what they're talking about, it's very often true. It's a difficult place to exist unless you're a natural diplomat and you have some Japanese language skill. So yeah, anyways, going back to the typical path where you come over and you get a job as an English teacher in your early mid-20s, and yeah, woo, living in Japan, pretty girls everywhere, cheap beer, job's not that hard, great salary, you know, then add 10, 15, 20, I'd say maybe 25 years to that before people are going to stop hiring you. And things start to look a little bit different. You're still going to be making the same salary, for better or worse. Some people are very good with their money. You're still going to be doing the same job, okay? And like literally, it's not like you're going to move up the chain and then be, you know, be like a regional manager. There were schools that were like that. GEOS, which pretty much tanked. It reached its apex in 2010. Did that. They had foreigners, you know, working in the back office, designing materials, and you know, traveling around the country as managers. But those days are pretty much gone. So it's something to think about. You are going to literally be doing the exact same job for literally the exact same pay, if not less, maybe a little more, in your 50s as you were in your 20s. And you're going to be doing it in Japan with all the difficulties of assimilation and isolation issues and lack of opportunity. So my advice to you is, if you really want to come live in Japan, you know, if you've met a lovely woman or a man and you want to come live here, you need to do your research and prepare things mentally. Prepare yourself mentally, because it's not going to play out as you would like it unless you really design your life. You can't rely on Japanese society to help you out. Okay, you're going to be the foreigner no matter what you do, and it's really, 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 really something to think about. Personally, for me, my entry into Japan wasn't something I saw coming, in the sense that I decided, golly gee, what country should I leave my own for and live in indefinitely? I think I'll choose Japan. That's not what happened. I met a girl, and we got married, and she was lovely, and my God, we were so in love, you know. And she wanted to come home to Japan, so me, being my young liberal Seattleite, you know, guy that I was, said, yeah, why not? Sounds great. And my dad, my father, and mother both, you know, rest in peace, may they both, encouraged me, because my father had moved from England to the U.S. And so anyways, long story short, I woke up one day to find myself in Japan. And here I am 11 years later. And what I've learned at that time is, like, wow, stop and think first, okay? I was lucky in the sense that I had the wits about me to focus on studying the language to a degree that gave me some independence, which a lot of people don't. That's a big mistake. You're kidding yourself if you do that, and you know you're going to be here a long time. And then on top of that, I also had an opportunity that just kind of barely let me squeak by with opening my own business and building up the revenue to a point that I could live off of. But even that, now here I sit, and I realize I've got to keep going. I've still got to keep digging myself out of this Japan hole I've dropped myself into. And what that means is seeking more opportunity and continuing to put essentially the same effort I've been putting into changing my life, simply because I'm in Japan, as I have been since the day I got here. So it's not a bad place, objectively speaking, but I would say, hazard to say, I might add, that socially and professionally speaking, Japan is kind of a desert. Okay, so think about that. If you happen to come across this video and you're like, I really want to go to Japan, and that's cool, that's great, but realize it's not the type of society that's going to give you the kind of support and inclusion that you're probably currently enjoying if you're living in your own country. Okay, people don't immigrate to Japan for better opportunity. Okay, that should tell you something. They come here as guests usually, guests of universities or companies for some super specific skill they can offer, or they come here as kind of almost seasonal English teachers, or occasionally they come here on a spousal visa. Okay, but with the exception of the people that are married here, almost all of those other folks go home in a few short years. Okay, and that should really tell you something. There are exceptions with people that honestly love Japan, and that's great. It's a lovely country. But that doesn't mean it's the best place to live long term, unless you're the type that can do it. Okay, and there's most people that I know in my life, even the people over here, the expats over here, aren't that type. Okay, so think about it. Okay, I'm not trying to bash Japan here. I've put my time in, and I'm speaking from the inside, so to speak. I know what this place is about. I can function in the society. And I'm telling you, if you want to invest, say 5, 10, 15, 20 years of your life over here, it's not going to be easy. It could be rewarding. But be aware of what you're getting into. Personally, I feel if I had been aware, if I just done my research, like what's it like to live in Japan long term, I would have been a lot better prepared and maybe made a lot smarter choices, a bigger number of them a lot earlier. Still relatively young enough to change things up. But I also feel like I lost a lot of time kind of wandering around. So when you come to Japan, don't ever forget who you are and what you can bring to the table and what kind of opportunities are out there. Don't get stuck in your local environment. It's not going to give you much back, okay? So keep an open mind and keep working hard. And stay optimistic. Don't get bogged down in what this place will do to you mentally or emotionally, okay? Because you are a stranger in a strange land, and you are going to struggle with that, and you are going to be treated as such, inevitably. So get used to it and get on it, or go home. Those are really the two best options. All right, so anyways, my update. All right, hope you enjoyed it, and as always, questions, comments are welcome. Until next time, bye-bye.